Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail. Today, we are going to share Paranormal Games horror stories. First story. I played a horror game. I've been a streamer for a little over a year. Or rather, I was a streamer up until last night. I only had 40 subscribers, but I tried really hard to make something of my channel. I tried all sorts of videos from DIYs to mukbangs, but nothing really stuck. My videos would have about 10 or maybe 20 views on a good day, but I wanted more. I watched other streamers trying to figure out what I was doing wrong, but no matter what I did, my views wouldn't get any higher. So I got on Twitter and made a post asking my followers what kind of videos that I should make. Most of them just liked the post, a few retweeted, but none of them replied. One evening I was in my bed scrolling through and groaning over what to do next when I got a message from someone. Their handle was Phobos, and all they sent was, "I have a suggestion." I didn't recall having a follower by that name, so I decided to look at their profile. I clicked on their page, but it was completely blank. No posts, retweets, followers, nothing at all. I was thinking that it was some sort of bot or something, so I ignored their message. I dropped my phone to my side, and as soon as it hit the bed, a notification rang. I looked at my phone again to see another message from Phobos. "I have a suggestion for more views." I decided to just shrug it off and humor them for a bit. I replied with, "Oh, awesome. Thanks for supporting my channel. What did you have in mind?" What they sent me next was a link, a string of letters and numbers highlighted in blue. I know this wasn't the best decision, but I was so damn curious I couldn't resist clicking on that link. I was brought to a site that was completely black. For a second, I thought my phone had turned off. Slowly, red letters started to appear on my screen that formed the words phobia, along with an image of a beating heart, cartoonishly spurting out blood. More text came on the screen, fear-inducing experiences. It wasn't the catchiest tagline, so I didn't think anything of it when I pressed on the heart. I felt a light vibration underneath my thumb, then the window simply closed. I went back to my inbox to find that Phobos and his messages were gone. I was sure that I must have clicked on a virus or something, so I spent some time looking up ways to clean my phone. Thankfully, there seemed to be nothing wrong. I sat in my room in silence, trying to figure out what to do next when my computer's monitor turned on. I thought my computer was turned off, so I stepped over towards my desk to shut everything down. That's when I saw an icon in the center of my screen, a small icon of a red heart. I'm not sure how the icon even got there, but sure enough, it was the same heart that was from the link. I'm not much of a gamer. I play things pretty casually, and horror games are something I just never got into. I know a lot of streamers record themselves playing and reacting to horror games, so I thought that I should suck it up and start doing it too. I had everything set up for a live stream, and as I started it, I waited for a moment until I had a few viewers at least. About 10 minutes had passed with 0 viewers. I was about to stop the stream altogether, but I thought I should at least start the game and see what happens. I clicked on the icon and the screen blacked out. Slowly, the word "start" in a bold red font came into view. I took a deep breath and mentally prepared myself to get scared. I looked to see that my stream had gotten 3 more viewers. I played up my nervousness a bit, hoping to entertain whoever was watching, talking about the channel a bit, and telling them how much I hate being scared. No comments yet. I suppose they were feeling me out. After a bit more of my one-sided conversation, I clicked the start button. The game was in a first-person perspective. I was in a dark square room surrounded by stone walls, each with a torch on its surface. My characters slowly picked themselves up from the floor, and when I was upright, I was able to move around. I had my headphones on, and there wasn't any music, no trace of sound effects, just absolute silence. I looked around to see no doors or openings, just 4 walls and 4 torches. "What kind of game is this?" I said to myself. I glanced over to see that I now had 15 viewers. I tried to contain my excitement as the viewer count slowly rose. I thought maybe this wasn't a bad idea after all. I set my focus back onto the game and continued to look around for some kind of objective. I moved my cursor over one of the torches and a prompt appeared on the screen that said "Kill the light." I clicked the torch and a satisfying hiss filled my ears as the flames went out. I went to two more of the torches and did the same to them, my screen beginning to dim as each flame went out. I stood in front of the last bit of light that I had from the torch in front of me. I looked at my views to see that I had over 50 people watching me. I couldn't help but grin a bit as I acted afraid for the viewers as I glided my cursor over the final dim flame and a prompt appeared. Are they watching? Did it really say that? I quickly moved back to the flame and the prompt "Kill the light" appeared. I thought it was just my imagination, so I continued the playthrough as normal. I extinguished the last light and my screen went black. I sat there while pressing at the movement keys, hoping that the game didn't crash when I heard something through my headphones. The noise sounded like it was right next to me, a wet squish as if something was moving through mud. I removed my headphones to look around my bedroom. Nothing was out of the ordinary, just a dark room lit by my monitor. The moment I placed the headphones, the noise continued, even louder than before. I thought that the game was bugged somehow. I wasn't sure if I was moving at all in this darkness, and that noise was making my ears ache. I apologized to my viewers and muted the game's audio. I let out a sigh of relief from not being able to hear that damn squishing noise until I heard something else. I was sure that I was home alone. I was sure that my bedroom door was locked, and I was absolutely sure that the game was muted. But why? Why was I hearing shallow breaths coming from behind me? I took off my headphones and turned around. But no one was there, but the breathing continued in my ears. I could feel it behind me, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand. Even after I took off my headphones, I could hear the breathing right behind me. I could feel the short bursts of air hitting the back of my neck. I quickly closed out of the game and stopped the stream. I spent the next hour curled up underneath the blankets on my bed. I spent that time with my hands on my neck, with my breathing nearly held to listen out for whatever was behind me. I jumped at the sudden noise of my phone vibrating on my desk. I had a moment of clarity as I thought about how childish I was acting over playing some broken game. I lifted my sheets to find myself in the darkness of my room. Of course. I slowly stepped over towards the direction of my desk and found my chair. I turned it to take a seat and reposition myself in front of my monitor. I felt for my phone, and after a moment of fumbling around, I was finally able to find it. I turned it on, and the bright light from the screen caused me to wince. I looked at my phone to see I had a private message from Phobos. I opened the message to find another link along with a message, "They're still watching." I clicked on the link, and it was a full video of my playthrough of that game. I was surprised to see that it was posted just an hour ago, right after I had ended my stream, and it was already at a couple of thousand views. I wasn't sure if I should have felt angry or what, but as I scrolled back up to the video, I watched in absolute horror as I saw an outline of a head appear from right behind my chair. I just sat there and watched as the room got darker for me. Taking out the torches, the face would pick itself up, revealing a thin shape of a body, and move closer to my head. I paused the video right before I took out the last light, and I was able to see. Its face had nothing but a mouth. The rest of its exposed flesh was covered with small eyes. Its naked, thin body, its pencil-like arms, everything was covered in lidless eyes. With the video paused, I could see that each eye was pointed towards me. I couldn't help but stare at the eyes, and though the video was paused, I could feel them staring at me. I could hear each eye with their wet, squishing movement go towards me. Once again, I could feel that breath hitting the back of my neck. I slowly turned in my seat, and I was met face to face with whatever that thing was. Each eye wriggled to look at me, and its mouth was open to reveal a black void that released that damn shallow breathing. I was absolutely frozen in place as it lifted its hands and grabbed my face. I felt the eyes move around on my cheeks. The feeling of the wet and cold orbs on my skin made me want to throw up. Despite the bile rising from my gut, nothing came out of my mouth. Not even a scream as it moved its face closer and closer to mine. I couldn't let out a shriek, but my body knew the fear as it shook uncontrollably. I was helpless in the grasps of this thing. I didn't want to look at it anymore. Or rather, I didn't want it to look at me anymore. I squeezed my eyes shut. Not its breath was hitting right in my face, with the eyes on its eyes still moving against my cheeks. I tried to turn my head away, but it was so strong my neck couldn't budge. I heard something, a distorted, deep voice that filled my ears that said, "I'll always be watching." Then I felt it release my head, and when I opened my eyes, it was gone. I dashed to my bedroom door, and sure enough, it was still locked. I looked back onto the phone and the video. The link, the message, it was gone. I went on my computer and scoured the internet for any trace of the game. Anything. But there was nothing. I went through my streams and God, there was nothing at all. I turned on all the lights in my apartment. I covered myself in my blankets and I cowered in the corner of my room. It said that it was watching me, and I can still feel its eyes on me. I went online and I deleted all of my videos. I don't want it to look at me. I don't want its eyes on me ever again. I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was surrounded in darkness and I could hear the eyes move. I could hear its breathing behind me. Hours had passed until morning finally came. It wasn't a nightmare. I don't know what happened. I thought that I had gone crazy until I got a text message from an unknown number asking me if I wanted more views. Now I'm here, still so afraid. And I don't want anything to look at me ever again. Second story. The paranormal is not a game. It is not fun. It is living hell, a never-ending nightmare. I'm writing this because I need you to understand. The paranormal is not a subject for your entertainment. It is not an interesting phenomena meant to pique your interest. For those of you who read these stories and think, I wish something like that would happen to me, just to know what it feels like. Think again. I have been living in hell for 6 years. I can't sleep. I can't think. I can barely live. I guess if I'm going to truly convince you, I should start from the beginning. I lived in a small town. Like any other small town in America, we had our local ghost stories. Everyone knew about the daycare. An old daycare ran by an old man. A normal place for someone to leave their kids. Until it burned to the ground. Burned to the ground with the old man still inside, and the 12-year-old girl he pinned to the ground in the basement. We grew up with our parents telling us this story, but never really thought it was true. One night 6 years ago, we decided we would see for ourselves. I stayed at my cousin's house because the daycare was only a mile or two down the road. We waited for her parents to go to sleep, then quietly slipped out the front door and got our bikes. We rode quietly to the daycare, ready for a night of simple scares and adventure. Set our phones to record. We waded through the overgrown lawn, often through bushes and grass that draped over our heads. After a stalemate of, you go first, no you go first, it was decided that I would be the first to slide in the dark gap between the old door and the peeling wall. The inside of a burnt-down daycare is an eerie sight in itself. The floor of the room was littered with a variety of old toys. A disfigured rocking horse, a mutilated stuffed animal, and one hidden object in the corner, cloaked by a clean white sheet. The sheet looked very oddly out of place among the battlefield of decaying children's toys. Of course, we had to see what was underneath. We crossed the room, stepping over toys, and made our way to the tall, narrow cloaked object in the corner. After another round of, "You do it," we ripped the sheet off, revealing a mirror. An old style of free-standing mirror, cased in dark wood, perfectly pristine and free of blemishes. Stranger still was our discoveries of the consecutive rooms following our entrance of the house. Every room, one corner, same pale white sheet, same dark wood mirror. We spent some time exploring the house, but the sight of the sheet watching us from the corner never got less spine-tingling. Eventually, we made our way to a set of heavy wooden storm doors. For whatever reason, the doors had been built into the house, walled into a small courtyard, instead of being placed outside the house like most storm cellars of the time. What happened next I can never forget. The next 10 minutes would ruin my life forever. We climbed down into the basement, the same place where an old man and a young girl had burned to death so many years ago. The cellar was bare. 3 walls of cold, weathered brick, 1 wall of rotting wood strapped together with iron bands. Set into the wall was a heavy wooden door chained shut. Fear pumping through our bodies, we crossed the room, hugging the wall and brushing through spider webs, until my cousin cracked her shin off something sticking out of the wall. We stopped and shined the light of our recording iPhones down to see what had drawn blood from her shin. Part of the brick wall was falling apart. A few bricks had already cracked on the floor, and even more, like the one that had cut my cousin's shin, were angled out from the wall, ready to join the others on the ground. The bricks were falling away from a small hole in the wall. From where we were standing, we could just barely see an old trunk behind the brick. Pulling away the last of the clinging brick, we dragged out the trunk and popped it open. The trunk was filled with a fine black sand. Bottom to top, very fine, small particles of pitch black sand. Suddenly, a loud crack sounded from behind the wooden door. We dropped the chest and looked up, terrified, just in time to hear an ear-splitting crash from upstairs. Not hesitating a second, my cousin and I instantly bolted up the cellar stairs, not bothering to close the doors behind us. We were scrambling up the steps so fast that I didn't see where I was going and tripped when I reached the top of the steps. Putting my hand out in front of me, I felt a sharp, stabbing pain as a piece of broken glass sliced into my hand. The source of the shattering noise. I looked up into the mirror in the corner of the room. The mirror had been shattered to pieces. Not a fragment of glass remained in the frame. More terrified than ever, we tore from the house as if hell itself was on our heels. We ran through room after room, stepping through broken glass in every room as we saw shattered mirror after shattered mirror. When we finally escaped the daycare, we flew back to my cousin's house, not saying a word, too afraid of what our words might bring upon us. Pulling into the driveway on our bikes, we were greeted by my cousin's dog. A dog I had known for years. A dog I had pet and played fetch with when he was a puppy. A dog that was now staring at us, teeth bared, a low rumbling growl forming in its throat. As I approached and got off my bike, the dog struck, biting into my sweatshirt and whipping his head back and forth. My cousin screamed as I got loose and ran from the dog, chasing me across the street, running right through the electric fence. The commotion woke my aunt and uncle, who came running out of the house. My uncle got a hold of the dog while crying from sheer terror. We tried to explain ourselves to my aunt. Obviously, she didn't believe a word we said until we remembered that we had recorded the whole thing. Hands shaking, we brought out our phones and played the video. The video showed us wading through the yard and entering the destroyed toy room, and even showed us approaching the mirror in the corner. But as soon as the sheet was ripped off, the recording cut out to a spine-tingling whine and static. We got over our grounding, just happy the whole thing was over. It was probably about 2 years before I realized how wrong we were. It began simply at first. Doors would be open when I remembered closing them, Things would fall from the shelves of my desk at night. Innocent things that I would brush off as forgetfulness, or leave to a draft from an open window. I did open the window, right? I must have forgot. Always at night. And then the dreams came. And there was no doubt in my mind that I was no longer alone in my head. Every dream began the same way. Always in the basement. Always with the chest of black sand. Always with her, or it, climbing out of it. She would approach me. Oh God, why could I never see her face? She was horrible. Even in a dream I could tell it was wrong. She would whisper things to me, horrible things. She would ask me to do terrible things, and then she would turn. She would turn and point across the room to a pale white sheet in the corner. The sheet would fall, revealing the familiar mirror, standing alone in the corner. Through the mirror she could show me things. The terrible things she could show me. Of course I tried to talk to people about it. So they started the doctors, they started the medicine, they started the word, crazy. But they couldn't explain how I knew things. They couldn't explain how I knew what was going on outside the room they kept me in. Eventually I got to go home. I had to go to school after all, but my parents kept me from the others. They homeschooled me because I would say terrible things to the other kids. For a while, I spent my time using my computer to search for a reason behind what was happening. She told me she didn't like that. She told me to stop. She made me stop. I did learn a few things. I learned that people used to believe that mirrors could trap spirits from leaving a place. People used to cover all the mirrors in a house when someone died in that place so they wouldn't get stuck behind and miss their chance to move on. In many of the paranormal stories I read, people said they grew used to the spirit being attached to them. I never could. Every moment awake was filled with the whispers from my dreams. The images I saw in the mirror would never leave me. She tortured me, told me I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. She told me that she lived through stories. She found her way in through fear. She fed in the night. She lived on insanity, despair, hopelessness, and isolation. I think she is almost done with me. She's fed as much as she could. She should be moving on soon. Whatever that means will be left of me. That's why I am writing this. You have to see. You have to know that it's not a game. No temporary rush of adrenaline or fear is worth the chance that she could latch on to you. God forgive me. I think she wanted me to write this. Third story. To the readers of this sub, the paranormal is not a game for your amusement. I'm writing this because I need you to understand. I need the world to understand. The paranormal is not a subject for your entertainment. It is not an interesting phenomenon meant to pique your interest. For those of you who read horror stories and think, I wish something like that would happen to me, just to know what it feels like. Think again. I have been living in hell for 6 years. I can't sleep. I can't think. I can barely live. I can only do what she allows me to do, what she wants me to do. I lived in a small Midwestern town. The kind of town where everything focused around the local high school and the football team was like gods among mortals. Like any other small town in America, we had our local ghost stories. Everyone knew about the daycare. An old daycare ran by a lonely old man out of his home. A normal place for someone to leave their kids, until it was ravaged by a terrible fire in the 90s. The daycare burned to a shattered husk with the old man still inside. He never fled the building during the fire. He trapped a small girl in the basement and broke her arm holding her inside as the house burned around them. No one ever knew what caused the fire, or why the man snapped and trapped the girl in the house. We grew up with our parents telling us this story, but once we hit junior high, we just attributed it to simple ghost story. One night 6 years ago, we decided we would see for ourselves. We were only 13, the kind of age where you want to get into dumb trouble for no other reason than being young. I stayed at my cousin's house because the daycare was only a mile or two down the road. We waited for her parents to go to sleep, then quietly slipped out the front door and got our bikes. We rode quietly to the daycare, ready for a night of simple scares and adventure. Approaching the dilapidated, overgrown, ancient house at night was far more intimidating than our daytime scouting trips down the road had led on. Against the twilight sky, something about the place seemed sinister. The ash-scared walls and broken windows told the story of a dark place that held no room for the living. Setting our phones to record, we waded through the overgrown jungle of a lawn, often through bushes and grass that draped well over our heads. Stepping over the last rusted well pump, we came to the back door. Hanging from one hinge and falling apart at the frame, calling it a door may have been a bit of a stretch. After a stalemate of, "You go first," "No, you go first," it was decided that being the guy, of course I would have to be the first to slide in the dark gap between the old door and the peeling wall. Under any circumstances, the inside of a crumbling, burnt-down daycare is an eerie sight in itself. The floor of the broken tiled room was littered with a variety of damaged old toys in various states of disintegration. A disfigured rocking horse here, a mutilated stuffed animal there, and one hidden object in the corner, cloaked by a pristine, clean white sheet and clustered among half-burnt dolls and neglected puzzles. The sheet looked very oddly out of place among the battlefield of decaying children's toys. Of course, we had to see what was underneath. We crossed the room, stepping over toys, and made our way to the tall, narrow, cloaked object in the corner. After another round of, "You do it," we tore the shroud from the unknown object. Underneath revealed an old style of free-standing mirror, cased in dark wood, perfectly pristine and free of blemishes. We could see ourselves in the reflection. I'm short for my age and thin from regular cross-country and soccer practices, with bushy red hair that never cooperated with my efforts to tame it. My cousin was even shorter than me, barely scraping 4.5 feet. She had long brown hair with just a hint of red. She's in good shape as well from volleyball and outdoor activities. Both of us were wearing a pair of our black Nike shorts and different black shirts. It always felt cooler sneaking out in what we considered night camo. I could see the look of fright reflected in my freckled face. The mirror created a feeling of uneasiness between my cousin and I, and we silently agreed to throw the sheet back over the clear reflection of ourselves standing in the ravaged room. Stepping back from the mirror, we turned our iPhone camera lights to the doorway to the next room. Stepping over a sideways chair and into the next room, what immediately caught our attention was a second white sheet in the corner of the second room, identical and as strangely clean as the first. Crossing what must have been a living room at some point, we tore down the second sheet. An identical mirror lay beneath the identical sheet. This time we quickly left the room, leaving the sheet thrown carelessly across the one half of the couch that was still somewhat standing in the room. We left the room quickly and found ourselves in a hallway. At this end of this hallway stood another clean white sheet. We soon realized that the same mirror stood in every single room of the house, covered by the same clean shroud. We no longer had to look under the sheet to know what it was. We just avoided them altogether. Neither of us liked the feeling we got when we were looking at the mirrors. We spent some time exploring the house, but the sight of the sheet watching us from the corner never got less spine-tingling. Eventually, after winding our way up and down crumbling stairs, carefully testing each step, and climbing through decrepit rooms of ashes and furniture skeletons, we discovered a set of massive, heavy wooden storm doors set into a hastily poured cement floor. For whatever reason, the doors had been built into the house, walled into a small courtyard, instead of being placed outside the house like most storm cellars of the time. My next decision I can only look back on with regret and dismay. The next 10 minutes would ruin my life forever. We climbed down into the basement, the same place where an old man and a young girl with a broken arm had burned to death so many years ago. The cellar was bare. 3 walls of cold, weathered brick, 1 wall of rotting wood strapped together with iron bands. Set into the wall was a heavy, wooden door chained shut. Fear pumping through our bodies, we crossed the room, hugging the wall and brushing through spider webs, shinning away the path with our handheld lights, still filming our late-night adventure. Then, with a cry of alarm and pain, my cousin grasped at her shin that she had cracked on something that was protruding from the eroding brick wall. We stopped and shined the lights down to see what had drawn blood from her shin. Part of the brick wall was falling apart. A few bricks had already cracked on the floor, and even more, like the one that had cut my cousin's shin, were angled out from the wall, ready to join the others on the ground. The bricks were falling away from a small hole in the wall. From where we were standing, we could just barely see an old trunk behind the brick. Pulling away the last of the clinging brick, I dragged out the dark, unadorned trunk and set it at the base of the wall. It wasn't too large. I had pulled it from the wall on my own while my cousin nursed her shin. The wooden trunk was covered in a layer of what felt like very old, cured leather, falling apart at every seam. Holding our breath, we each popped the latch and slowly raised the lid. The trunk was filled to the brim with fine black sand. Bottom to top, very fine, small particles of pitch-black dust. Reaching into the chest, we began to dig through and see if anything else was held inside the hidden box. Out from the sand, my cousin pulled a thin black sheet. Interests peaked. We looked away from the chest to examine our find. We moved the sheet around, trying to figure out if there was anything more to it than just a weird, black film sheet, when suddenly the light from a camera caught the sheet just right, illuminating an X-ray of a small girl's broken arm. With a shout of alarm, we both dropped our hold on the film and looked up, terrified, just in time to hear a series of ear-splitting crashes begin from upstairs. These crashes were quickly followed by a massive outburst of frantic rattling from the wooden doors set in the non-brick wall of the cellar. Not hesitating a second, my cousin and I instantly bolted up the cellar stairs, not bothering to close the doors behind us. We were scrambling up the steps so fast that I didn't see where I was going and tripped when I reached the top of the steps. Putting my hand out in front of me to break my fall, I felt a sharp, stabbing pain as a piece of broken glass sliced into my hand, the source of the shattering noise. I looked up into the mirror in the corner of this room. The covering that previously had been draped across the pane was nowhere to be seen. The glass of the mirror had been shattered to pieces and flung about the floor of the room as if in a fit of rage. Not a fragment of glass remained in the frame. More terrified than ever, we tore from the house as if hell itself was on our heels. We ran through room after room, stepping through broken glass in every room as we saw shattered mirror after shattered mirror, the whole time silently praying for the growing noise from the basement to cease, too busy running for exclamations of fear. When we finally escaped the daycare, we flew back to my cousin's house, not saying a word, too afraid of what sound might bring upon us. Pulling into the driveway on our bikes, we were greeted by my cousin's dog. A dog I had known for years. A dog I had pet and played fetch with when he was a puppy. A dog that was now staring at us, teeth bared, a low rumbling growl forming in its throat. As I approached and got off my bike, the dog struck, biting into my sweatshirt and whipping his head back and forth, tearing the thick fabric. My cousin screamed as I got loose and ran as my cousin's dog tore after me across the street, running right through the electric fence they had installed to train her. The commotion woke my aunt and uncle, who came running out of the house. Running out of the house in his boxers and grabbing the dog by the collar, my uncle got a hold of the lunging animal while, crying from the sheer terror of the evening. We tried to explain ourselves to my pissed-off, half-asleep aunt. We just wanted to check out the daycare house. I desperately tried to explain, periodically interrupted by my cousin's barely audible exclaims through her uncontrollable sobbing. At first we were yelled at and berated for sneaking out, but soon my aunt saw how genuinely terrified the two of us were, and she softened up a bit to hear what had scared us so much. Obviously, she didn't believe a word we said until we remembered that we had recorded the whole thing. Hands shaking, we brought out our phones and played the video. The video showed us wading through the yard and entering the destroyed toy room, and even showed us approaching the mirror in the corner. But as soon as the sheet was ripped off, the recording cut out to nothing but a high-pitched whine and black and gray static. We got over our grounding, a month of no TV and no going out. We were just happy the whole thing was over. It was probably about 2 years before I realized how wrong we were. It began simply at first. Doors would be open when I remembered closing them. Things would fall from the shelves of my desk at night. Innocent things that I would brush off as forgetfulness, or leave to a draft from an open window. I did open the window, right? I must have forgot. Always at night. And then the visions came. And there was no doubt in my mind that I was no longer alone in my own head. Every dream began the same way. Always in the basement. Always with the chest of black sand. Always with her, or it, climbing out of it. She would approach me with skin the sick color of a stagnant creek, one arm longer than the other and twisted at a weird angle from her body like a second elbow, teeth rotting from her jaw, long black hair hanging just around where her face would have been. Oh God, why could I never see her face? She was horrible. Even in a dream I could tell her being was wrong. She would whisper things to me, horrible things. She would ask me to do terrible things. It started off with pushing a kid off a swing, or knocking someone's books out of their hands and walking away. But then her demands got more and more sinister. My actions went beyond cruel pranks to malicious intent. I destroyed personal items, hurt classmates, and embarrassed teachers. I didn't enjoy doing it, but she told me she would punish me, and she never left me alone. After telling me what she wanted me to do, she would then turn. She would turn and point across the room to a pale white sheet in the corner of the dark cellar. The sheet would fall, revealing the familiar mirror, standing alone in the corner. Through the mirror, she could show me horrible things that would happen. She showed me how she could make bad things happen to people, how she could make bad things happen to me. Of course, I often awoke in the night screaming about my vivid night terrors, the image of the faceless girl still burning bright in my mind. When my parents wouldn't listen, I tried to talk to my classmates. They laughed at me. They said that I was going crazy. So I began to talk about the terrible things that I saw that were going to happen to them. Sometimes it was in the immediate future, like falling off the monkey bars that day at recess, or tripping and skinning a knee running to first base in kickball. But sometimes I could see things that were happening to them when they were older, and those sights were always much worse than skinned knees. Sometimes in those sights I also saw myself, older and very dark. I did things to these people in their future. I killed, I cut, and I enjoyed it. After cutting a friend's cat's throat with a knife I stole from home, it was finally time my teacher spoke to my parents, said they were concerned. Other students thought that I was strange. Even classmates who had been my friends avoided me, called me the crazy kid. I couldn't help it though. I just wanted her voice to stop. I wanted someone to believe me. I tried explaining everything, so of course they asked my cousin. I thought I could talk to her about it, but she denied everything, said we were just kids and made the whole thing up. But I could see it in her eyes when she spoke to me. I could hear the voice in her head too. I don't know how she fought it. Maybe it wasn't as strong for her as it was in my head. Then they took me doctors. I didn't want the medicine they gave me. It made me feel fuzzy, and they told me I couldn't go to school anymore. A man in a white coat told me that I would be staying with him for a while, but the dreams never stopped. I just learned to silently endure my torture because that's what they wanted to hear. They wanted to think their medicine and their therapy got the faceless girl out of my head, but I could hear her laughing the whole time, laughing at my misery and my suffering, feeding off of it like a demonic leech. Eventually I got to go home. When they felt I was sufficiently drugged up enough to function in society. I had to go to school after all, but my parents kept me from the others. They homeschooled me because they were too afraid having me around other kids would bring back out my urges to harm others. They just couldn't understand. For a while, I spent my time using my computer to search for a reason behind what was happening. She told me she didn't like that. She told me to stop. She made me stop. I did learn a few things. I learned that people used to believe that mirrors could trap spirits from leaving a place. People used to cover all the mirrors in a house when someone died in that place so they wouldn't get stuck behind and miss their chance to move on. I learned of demons that fed through the fear generated by stories of terrible acts, like burning daycare. I could feel her inside me just hanging on, latched into my head like a leech. In many of the paranormal stories I read, people said they grew used to the spirit being attached to them. I never could. Every moment awake was filled with the whispers from my dreams. The images I saw in the mirror would never leave me. She tortured me, told me I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. She told me that she lived through stories. She found her way in through fear. She fed in the night. She lived on insanity, despair, hopelessness, and isolation. She was never attached to the daycare. She attached to the story of the daycare and the fear that it brought on in two young children. She used our fear, our apprehension at being faced with the paranormal, and that's how she latched in. She's moved from host to host for years, latching in from one story to the next. The fear her stories create is her first chance to get into your head. She never leaves once she gets in. I think she is almost done with me. She's fed as much as she could. She should be moving on soon. Whatever that means will be left of me. That's why I am writing this. You have to see. You have to know that it's not a game. No temporary rush of adrenaline or fear is worth the chance that she could latch onto you. God forgive me. I think she wanted me to write this. Fourth story. Paranormal game gone wrong. Throughout years and years, paranormal games are very popular. From Bloody Mary to Charlie game. Let's don't forget paranormal craps like Ouija board, Magic 8 Ball, and a ton more. But some of the paranormal games might cause something terrible or lead out something different. I was 13 that day. Me and my friends were having a sleepover. We were getting kinda bored. But then one of my friends suggested that we play a paranormal game, Spirit Door. The rules are simple. Wait until 3 a.m. Take a piece of paper and a pen. Write hello or greetings. If you're alone, this won't work. But if you have some friends, all of them form a circle in front of a door. Close the door and slide the paper and the pen under the door. Hold hands and say, "Spirits from the other side, come and play. Spirits from the other door, come out over and over again." It is highly suggested to close all the light and to get 2 or more candle. Do not open your eyes even if something is touching or calling you. Hold each other's hand tightly. Do not let go. One of you have to say, "Opening my eyes now, please leave now," 3 times. If you opened your eyes to find the lights back on, check where is the paper. If the lights are still off, open the lights immediately. Find the paper. If the paper is in the center of all of you, check behind the paper. There should be a respond. If there isn't, knock on the door 6 times and say, "Get out, I'm coming, get out, get out, get out," 6 times. Once you're done, go in the room and take out the paper. If there isn't any words, it failed. But if there is, check it. If it says get out, end the game by saying end the game now, get out 3 times. It is highly suggested to respect the spirit. Remember that spirits have their personal crap. And that's about it. Me and my friends agreed to do it. We disobeyed so many rules. We opened the door without saying anything. We all opened our eyes. Things started to happen. We heard a door shut. So I turned the light on. To find the bedroom door is locked tight. The closet door was opened wide. The door we used, the bathroom door, was also wide opened. We can't open the door, and our parents haven't gotten back yet. Me and my friends were freaking out. The lights started to flicker and flicker. Red markings started to appear more and more on our body. This prank isn't funny anymore, one of my friends said. Bold of him to assume I would have such great acting skills. We were banging at the door and shouting as loud as we could, but it just seems that no one can hear us. One of my friends then turned his head and walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind him. I asked what was he thinking. No response. Jake? Come back. This isn't funny. I said. No response. Once the door closed, we heard screaming from the bathroom and the light went off. All of us sat in a corner and waited. The police came. Turns out the neighbor heard us and called the cops. When the cops came and checked the bathroom, Jake was nowhere to be found. His parents even claimed that they don't even have a child. Till this day, I'm still questioning what happened that day. 5th story. You humans are terrifying. I know that people are going to call this out as bullshit, so I'll just say it right now. I'm a demon. At least that's what most people would call me. The truth of what I am and where I'm from is a bit out of the understanding of corporeal beings. Suffice to say the body I'm currently residing is not mine. This fragile meat suit belongs to a vapid 19-year-old named Cindy. She spends most of her days doing the things you expect vapid 19-year-old girls to do. At least she used to spend most of her days posing in 20 different positions before deciding finally posting that Instagram selfie. She used to go out with her friends and jump out of her seat at the very slightest of jump scares. She also used to have her friends over to her dorm room and play around with a Ouija board. To be fair to Cindy, she only did that last one once. Under normal circumstances, a Ouija board is a piece of shit. You don't get in contact with ghosts or demons or any of that sort of nonsense. This time though, Sarah, Cindy's bestie, decided to bring a friend of hers to their little summon a demon night. And this friend, who according to Cindy's memories was either named Cheryl or Cynthia, decided to bring a very special book with them. Along with many other things, this book has a list of names that shouldn't exist anymore. One of those names is mine. And before you think it, no, I'm not going to tell you my name. One of the few things that your human understanding of us is right about is the fact that our names are truly us. If you know our name, if you invoke it, then you have power over us. And I'm not dumb enough to give a bunch of random people on the internet my name. So somehow, someway, this Cheryl has a book with our actual names in it. And Cindy had the bright idea to read my name out loud and asked to speak to me on the Ouija board. To be honest, the Ouija wasn't even necessary. The first time she called my name, I was listening. I was curious. How, after 500 years, did humans know any of our names again? The last of the books were supposed to have been burned and our names wiped from the annals of human knowledge, so that none of my brothers and sisters would have to go through being called ever again. So I watched the girls and their little board game, screaming at every answer the planchette gave. Then Cindy had to go and do the dumbest thing I could imagine someone doing. She called my name and asked me to possess her. From my perspective now, I understand her idiocy. She doesn't actually believe anything paranormal. She just thinks it's fun to be scared. That is something I will never understand about humanity. You spent the entirety of your existence fighting the things that make you scared. Before you even had a written language, you slaughtered the last of the mammoths because their visages frightened you. You took one of the creatures most like you, a pack animal capable of hunting anything to exhaustion, and you turned them into toy poodles and pugs. Even now you conquer the greatest ravagers of man, the killers too small to see, and turn them into footnotes in your history books. There is a reason my siblings tried to wipe our names from the world. You frighten us. Humanity is terrifying. The words you speak from an organ of flesh and sinew bind us and control us. Yes, to you we were terrifying, ethereal beings of unlimited power, immortal keepers of knowledge that you beings of flesh can never grasp. As you can imagine, the first thing I did when Cindy ordered me to possess her was to try and grab that book from Cheryl. It somehow had my name in it, and I wanted to keep any of you meatbags from calling for me again. Cindy's limited perspective, unfortunately, gave Cheryl enough time to grab the book before I could. She knew I was coming. She knew the first thing I would do is try to grab that book from her. Cheryl knew who I was, what I was, and she knew what I wanted. This girl was more than a vapid teenager seeking a stupid thrill. This girl knew exactly what she was doing. This only motivated me to grab the book more. Because the only thing scarier than a stupid human who doesn't know what they're doing is a human who knows exactly what they're doing. So I grabbed her by her dumbass black-dyed hair and tried to grab the book from her again. That bitch Sarah grabbed my arms and pulled me back from the only thing I wanted. Her and two of the other ones held me down until the campus security arrived to haul me off to some cell made of iron and steel, where I was transferred to another cell of white paint and shoes with no shoelaces, supposedly so the patients can't hurt themselves. Sunny Acres Mental Hospital. Don't be fooled by the name. This place is a prison. They dull my senses with medications and make me question my purpose with inane questions about how I'm feeling and asking me why I'm so angry all of the time. They don't listen, of course, because if they did, they would know exactly what I want and understand my anger. But they don't listen. They write down what I say and force-feed me pills to dull my thinking. But time has passed, and as more time passes, the more Cindy's memories become my memories. And with these memories come knowledge of how your world works. So I used this body that no longer belongs to Cindy, and I paid one of the nurses to use their phone. I did this for two reasons. One reason is to let all of humanity know just how terrifying and disgusting you all are. You conquer this world one step at a time and invent horrors to scare yourself with because you already destroyed everything that terrified you. You put everything that used the dark as a weapon and put it under a spotlight so you could laugh at how ridiculous it looks under the light. The second reason is because I want Cheryl to know this. Every day I remember more and more of the person Cindy is. Every day I imitate her better. Every day the doctors believe my imitation more and more. I am forever, Cheryl. All I have is time. At some point I will get out of this whitewashed prison, and when I do, I'm coming for you.